This is a multi-storey tree line that includes fruit, the windbreaking, and has many other native plants in it. So it would be a very dense planting. It's fully exposed to the southern sun, but we have these oak trees that are already here, cork oak and Pyrenean oak, that provide some shelter and shade from the very hot summer sun. And so basically we have another two, a low and a middle layer that we create here. So the low layer will consist of native bushes such as very common rosemary or thyme or sage and others. So there will be a lot of other bushes here. And then there's lower fruit trees such as pomegranate here, but also some gooseberries later. And there will be some grapes growing up the trees. And in the higher layers there will be some apple trees and some loquat. The apple trees will be seeded. The loquat is a pot plant, you can see there. And also a few bigger native bushes such as oleander that we bought. Also a nitrogen fixing tree called gold rain that grows about to 4 to 5 meters height. And so we will not only plant what you see here, but every 10 centimeters there will be more native shrubs seeded. So what we feel is that, and it's very obvious that a lot of the earth and the agricultural land is very degraded. So we as humans, we have destroyed the land, so it has degraded, and the conditions for growth are getting much harder. And that's why we have to do a lot of watering and fertilizing and spraying. And we feel that this is not a very sustainable way of doing things, because on such agricultural fields there's barely any life that can survive. No bee finds a flower, and no earthworm finds something to eat, let alone any bigger animals. So we feel we want to get off this distinction of nature and growing food, and actually do both those things together. So we want to recover the environment at the same time as growing fruit. And that means that we want to actually provide food and shelter for many living beings. And ironically, it's actually them who do the jobs much better than we do. So that will also mean that if we create good conditions for them to grow, they will in return create fertile soil, and that will then lead to the fruit trees that the fruit trees are not the same as the recovery plants. They need much better conditions to grow. So the recovery plants and all the life and animals and insects that they attract below and above the ground, they will actually provide the conditions for our fruit trees to bear. Well, we feel that it's not very sustainable to do ongoing maintenance such as pruning or watering or fertilizing, because that also means that these resources have to come from somewhere. So there's a lot of labor, a lot of ore, but also many other lands where the fertilizers and water is taken from are then degraded, and we don't want to do that. So what we want to do instead is these plant associations will for example have a benefit to keep the moisture in the ground because it's very dense, And one thing that is known by now is that most fertility or most humans is actually produced through the plant itself making photosynthesis, and this creates sugars, and they are fed to the soil, and this builds the soil. So the more dense we plant, the more diverse, the more different plants, the more nutrients we will actually get into the soil. And in order to make this a maintenance-free system, we chose the plants accordingly to the conditions, but also in their spacing. So we don't want, for example, next to the low pomegranate bush, we don't want a big bush. So we have put rather small bushes to not impede the harvesting process, and not to have to go and prune, for example, prune the tree. So our aim with this whole project is to actually research on the systems and the principle that I just described, and make it very simple. Make it both simple and accessible and reproducible, so that it's simple enough that any person, no matter where they live and what their climate is, their resources, or their background, can actually implement this. For this reason, all of the research we do will be documented, and not only on video. The video has more the purpose of giving a visual idea, but there will be on our website, there will be all the documents to look up the details. Will be available as open source. What we did first is actually when we chose the position of the line, we used bamboo sticks in order to mark where we plant, and we dug. The bed is about 60 centimeters wide. We dug that with a mattock, and just is also a way that anybody can do, and is also the least invasive to the ground. And what we did actually is we just loosened the soil, so we didn't turn it around. So once the mattock was in, we just loosened, got out. It creates a nice bed. For all the pot plants, we use a spade to create a bit bigger hole that's deeper and wider than the pot plants, to have some loose soil. We will actually put down a lot of organic matter. So in this case, the main organic matter will be logs of chestnut and oak that come off the property, and pine shavings from a local sawmill. And it's maybe important to say that wood is basically the best fertilizer there is, because the lignin in the wood is basically very high energy concentrated carbon. And when this carbon is decomposed, it forms the main component of humus, of very good spongy soil. So that will be the main fertilizer that will be arranged. We'll show you later how we do that. And the straw will actually just be mainly to protect the soil and the organic matter from drying out in the dry conditions that will arrive in summer. Additionally, we have some cuttings of mulberry. The mulberries, along with some peach, they will be used to sort of fill up the spaces between the fruit trees. So there's basically a fruit that we can harvest, because they are very hardy and fast growing. A fruit we can harvest for the first 1 to 3 years until our main fruit trees get into their actual size and into production. And last to say, we have a fresh organic matter, and the fresh organic matter is actually used to seed for the seeding of fruit trees, in this case apple, and it has the purpose to keep the seed moist. Fruit trees need to be kept moist until they germinate, and then until then the worms will have decomposed that matter, and it will provide a very good starting soil for the seedling. Well, if we have a pot plant here, I would say that's about 20 centimeters wide and 30 deep. So we will go at least 40 centimeters wide, 50 centimeters deep, about, I would say, roughly double. For little plants, again, I would go double the actual size. Well, first of all, I would maybe like to explain a bit why we want to plant from seed and why we want to plant largely from seed in this project. And this is that we feel that we don't really have enough knowledge to know what is the best spot for a plant. So the really awesome thing about a seed is that if you put it in a place and it grows, it means the conditions are perfect, because otherwise it wouldn't grow. And on top of that, it will mean that it will adapt fully to the conditions, because it will interact with the environment and it will adjust to the environment. So this is where it's really important that we give good conditions, because if it will adjust to good conditions, it will be a healthier tree, and for example, the fruits will taste better. So these are a few reasons that make it advisable to grow from seed. It's also a lot cheaper. Everybody can collect seeds and doesn't have to buy plants from the nursery that are quite expensive. And also, as we said, they could not fit here. And the root growth hasn't been already in this soil. They have been watered and fertilized, so they're not really as well adapted to the local conditions. When you put the seed and it strikes, it's going to be a healthy individual and it's going to live for a long time without maintenance, because it's so vital. So I'm going to proceed with to show you, because we're going to plant the fruit seeds a bit different than the recovery plants. And for that, I would like to introduce to you a bit the method that we are actually. This is our bed. It's about 50 centimeters, and the actual bed to seed in is 30 centimeters. So we use a string to mark the lines, and we have a very concise planting guideline where every 10 centimeters we know exactly what plant to put. And why we put a plant every 10 centimeters has to do with that we want in the end to have ideally a ratio of 1 fruit-bearing plant to 10 recovering plants. And because as we explained, we feel the degree of degradation makes it necessary. There's a lot more plants that add and increase the fertility, because the fruit-bearing plants are more plants that need resources in order to produce fruit. So they're more taking from the soil. So we want a lot more of the plants that give to the soil and add and attract creatures that also gives to the soil. So that's why we do that. So here you can see, like every 10 centimeter there will be another shrub. And on top of that, this is the center line for the shrubs and the woody plants. And on top of that, 10 centimeters from that, there will be every 10 centimeters there will be a herb, an annual plant. And the reason for that is that those trees are longer lasting but slower growing, so they will not create much of a density or microclimate in the first 1 or 2 years. But those fast growing smaller herbs, you can think of things like clary sage or yellow clover, and they will already grow quite big potentially in the first year and second year. Malva is another example, and they will create almost like a miniature version of a forest that will keep water and provide some shade to the very small seedlings we have here. That will, most trees when they're babies, they want some protection, so that's what those herbs will create. So let's proceed. We're gonna plant the seed of an old apple variety, and that variety is called in English King of the Pippins, or Reine des Rainettes in French. Is a very old, very good tasting variety. I think it's about ungrafted. It's 600 years old. The way we do is I dig a little hole. The soil here is quite poor. Like it's more of dirt than already formed soil. Soil is really fluffy and spongy. Has a high organic compound. Like it's more like a high humus content, and this soil doesn't have that much at all. So this is what we will need to work towards. The combinational effort of the support plants that will make photosynthesis and feed the soil organisms, and they are what makes the soil good. And they will also provide nutrients by roots dying and being eaten, by dying off, by dropping leaves, by bringing in other animals, like even, like insects that will die here, that will leave their excrements, and among other things. These are all the ways to bring in organic matter and to improve the soil. And on top of that also we place some extra organic matter for the start, such as the logs and the wood shavings. We will show that after. But so here we want for the fruit seed, we want to have it be kept quite moist until it germinates. I think I've explained that before, so I will just add some organic matter here before I place the seed. In this case, I would be taking four seeds. Usually, storage of fruit seeds is a bit more difficult than of other seeds because they want to be kept moist. So in this case, we have eaten them quite recently and just put them in a wet paper towel. But ideally, you do even better than this. Here we have kept it with some pulp, keeps it wet and also ferments it a bit. But ideally, we want to create even better way of preserving fruit seeds at top viability even for a longer time. The best way, because it's more difficult to keep fruit seeds, the best thing is once you eat it, like when it is in season, you plant it directly. That's the way it's basically done in the environment. An animal goes, eats something, and it leaves its excrements, and that's a perfect, it's directly seeded into the ground basically. So I use 4 seeds. I would definitely mostly do at least 3. Just, you know, so that's a great thing about seeds. It's more generous. You can lose some. Like if you buy a plant, it costs a lot. You want to keep it alive. But if you have lots of seeds and lots come up, you don't have to worry. So I don't put them very deep, just enough so they're not dug out. It shouldn't be too loose. So I'm just gonna have it a bit covered with soil. So yeah, and then obviously later, once we have finished with all of the seeding, we'll show you how to cover it properly. I want to show how I proceed with other types of seed. Just looking for my measurement. There's 8. Yeah. So because I have very precise spot for each plant. Like we have an Excel sheet that gives us exactly which plant goes where. So here on 8m40, we grow a nitrogen fixing local bush. Actually, that Pierre collected from the property. It's called Adenocarpus complicatus, or codeço in Portuguese. So I'm just with my dirty hands trying to get. Now also, again, I'm going to go for about 3 seeds. So it's a very different planting process because these seeds, like if I would put too moist matter around here, would just rot them. So here I really just see these are quite small seeds. Like it's very hard to see with the dirt. But if it's the bigger the seed, the more deep it likes to be put. So like an oak seed, you can put a few centimeters into the ground, just like a squirrel would. But here it's really quite sufficient to have it quite close to the surface. Just have to make sure that I'm in the center line, which I am sort of. Yeah. So it's a very simple process. So you can see also it's another advantage of growing from seed. Like it took us, for each pot plant to put in the ground, it took us 5 to 10 minutes, definitely, if we make it properly. So this takes me 5 to 10 seconds. So you can see you can seed a lot more in shorter time than if you do planting. With cuttings, in my opinion, there's a few things to look for, and I will explain that a bit. So what I always do, if I make the cuttings, and the cuttings, as you can see, are usually about 30, 20 is a bit small, 30, but hasn't to be much bigger than 40. And what you want is, you need these eyes, I think it's what you call them. And so that's where the new plant is basically going to come out. Not here, but here. So now there's two ways of planting it, and that's basically just a position, how you position it. So if you have very dry climate, it might be advisable to plant it like this, towards the evening sun, because that means the strongest and hottest sun will only hit on one point and not hit the whole plant and dry it out. So you would, in that case, you'd plant it like this. You do it towards the west, and now you have to make sure that this eye here is not underneath, but it's actually up. So it doesn't have to go around, but it can go straight up. This is cuttings of mulberry, and we have some young. This is a very thin one, a young one, and some older branches. You want quite vital branches. So I'm not. To be honest, I haven't got so much experience with mulberry, so I'm trying a few. That's why I'm putting more than one. So this is a bit of an older one. And also what I want to mention is that when I make the cuttings, where I cut the lower part, so I know definitely what is the low part and the high part, because if I put it that way, it's never going to grow. It's cut on an angle, which makes it a lot easier to put into the ground. It's thicker. And what you can do, you cut it on an angle and even take a bit that part off. Now it's not important, but sometimes if it's very fine bark and you put it in, it can peel off the bark. So you also snip off a little tiny bit here. And then the top part is just like that. So you know, that's the low part. You don't have to go and look. That's the part that goes into the soil. That's the part that sticks out. Well, in this case, we put mulberry. We put mulberry just as a kind of a filling crop. Mulberry is very hardy, very fast growing, and it produces fruit very early, and it produces fruit on the shoots that it makes the same year. So this can already make a fruit next year. And we make cutting because to be honest, that's also what is just available now. And because we don't really need this mulberry tree to be there for a long time, we're happy to take they're gonna be a little bit less vital than the ones from seed, but they'll definitely already be harvestable in 1 or 2 years. And after, depending on how we see fit, we're just gonna take them out, or because there will be shade, they will be taken out, and not to wait, like not have a very long time between cutting the cutting. Like you should basically cut it fresh and put it into the ground. Although I do have to say that I like seeds, I'm not a full expert on cuttings. It's an experiment, and I advise people to, and I will do the same to educate myself more on cuttings. Like so, this one I'm gonna do 2 ways. This one I'm gonna put straight. This one I put, like I said, towards the evening sun. So, and I would definitely want to go at least halfway. I'm not sure, but I think I have to look that up. That the where it's gonna make root is also strongly around the eye. So you would also want to have an eye in the ground. So we're using logs of chestnut and oak trees that are on the property, and this is the main mulch. Like this is very highly concentrated carbon, like high energy concentration, and this is the main mulch, and it will slowly release its nutrients, its energy over the next. Well, we'll see. Like a thing like this, it's like it goes faster than you think. So I would say I would give it 5 years, and so we put that down. So we have a bed approximately 30 to 40 centimeters. So you see here, this is sand. This is where the herb line is. So we mulch. So we are not gonna. The additional mulch, as you see here already, will not influence too much the herbs. So we wanted to have really contact on the ground, because that's when the soil life can really start to to get to it. This is a good size, 40 centimeters, very good, because if it gets too long, it can bow and then not have good contact to the soil. We want to have good contact to the soil. This is a nice size. This is a bit small for me, so I'll just do that. So here we have the pine shavings. They are much smaller. They will be they're also high energy, but they will be released a bit faster. So, and this will also keep the logs moist, because the moister they are, the better they can be decomposed. We want to create ideal conditions for that, and not be too frugal with that. So, and now we're gonna use the straw we put away first to the straw. This is just the energy of 1 year of growth or half a year of growth. This is energy of many years of growth. It's much richer and denser. Like this is heavy, this is light. So this leaves and straw is just really pretty much used to keep the good stuff from drying out. So we put that so it doesn't dry. So the straw is really the least important part, but again it can be good to not have it dry out too much. So, and in the end we're also gonna mulch lightly the middle part. Just to protect the ground, so the seeds, but we want the seeds to still be able to nicely be able to push through. So I just use that as well. And if I can still use a little bit of straw. So the more mix of materials and the more mix of different, like obviously the more mix of different leaves from different trees, different wood from different trees, they all have different nutrients. So the bigger the mix, the better. But you got to start with what you have. And the rocks, if you have an abundance of them like we do on our property, they collect moisture. So we're using them to collect moisture and also to keep this a bit together. And there is a potential to even use that moisture that they collect to grow another line of herbs here that form very strong roots that help that there will be no weeds or grasses, really no grasses getting into the line. So that's something we want to experiment with. A very typical herb that creates a root barrier in permaculture is comfrey, Symphytum officinalis. So that's used very widely, and so that's what we would use. That's native in all of Europe. Recovery plants, if you use them from a different continent, they can very rapidly become very invasive.